In fact, checking out who we've got in there, and I don't know what top chat does. Let's make it live chat. I want to see all the messages. So we've got Believe in Yourself. Oh, that reminds me, I've got to close this window, so I'm saving some bandwidth. So we've got Believe in Yourself, Sachi Gung Gung. I guess I'm just supposed to read one of those. Sachi Gung, good to see you indeed. Good evening. Steve from Berkeley. Bradford from a Starbucks in sunny St. Petersburg. Very nice. Well, as you know, I mean, very appropriate that you're watching this in Russia, since this is the show which also watches you back. Very, very good. Actually, I've never been to Russia before, so there you go. It must be very cool. We've got, who else we got here? We've got Bradford, Sachigung, and James Kelly. Boom. We've got Quentin Rankin. Boom. We got It Worked. We got Fat Albert. Actually, Sachigung. I totally, whenever I say hey, actually, that's exactly what I'm thinking every time. So, again, I know how old you are and what cartoons you watched, because they're the same as me. But yes, indeed. Hey. Oh, it's such a great show. It's just a shame that Bill Cosby and everything he touched that was so great is now associated like that. But there we go. Boom, boom. Yeah, there's another song as well. Boom, boom, boom. But there we go. Hey is indeed just iconic. And I think it stands on its own. It's great to see everybody here in the chat. And yeah, we've got, actually, not lately, there hasn't been a lot of news going on in Japan, but this week has been a busy week. There's been a few times I've been in discussions and I've shared deep thoughts. In fact, a couple of topics tonight that I would spend any amount of time on. But yes, as it turns out, there's a whole bunch of them on one night, so I think I am going to go straight into it. Remember, you can always grab my attention in the comments by typing @MarkHikoSimon. It will be highlighted if you do that. And I will try to pay attention. I will always jump in and answer your questions or take your topics if you would like me to do that. But otherwise, I'm gonna to Philip DeFranco, everybody says this now, even the YouTube creator channel, they say, let's just jump into it. Let's, they use a lot of, lately he's been doing the like this video or I will punch you in the throat. And apparently it had massive demographic benefit for him. I noticed that the YouTube creators didn't copy that, but they copied his other cache lines. Anyway, this is what I do for the first 20 minutes. I ramble, and I can't do that tonight because normally what happens is I ramble for the first 15 minutes, then I spend 10 minutes on the first story, and then I realize, geez, I'm already halfway through the show, I've only covered one story. So I'm going to have to move faster tonight. But quick look back in the comments. We've got the J-Vlog, good evening, yes indeed. We've got Barringer, we've got Tokyo 503. Welcome. Don't forget, please say hello. Please remember to like the video if you like it, and let's jump in. And if we've got time, I would like to do a tune at the end. Booyah, that is from today, this evening. Trump basically, and I'm just thinking, is it possible for me to get this out in a way that you can see the tweet, because there are actually two photos that I posted which are from the TV, and what I was interested in, it was a big there's a lot of anticipation. What was the American president's trophy going to look like at the sumo tournament today? Trump specifically, big pro wrestling fan, asked to be able to attend the sumo and to be able to present. Hey Abel, good to see you. Oh, no problem. Oh, actually, I didn't even notice, Abel. But yeah, hey, look, man, whenever you want to play Fortnite, hit me up. I'm actually getting into it lately. I'm playing on iOS, so I can't play like on a console, but I'm actually quite getting into it. In fact, I don't have that on the on my agenda for tonight. But if anyone wants to hear me talk about Fortnite, I can talk about Fortnite a little bit now. I've been sucked into that world, and it's actually quite good fun. So I can tell you as a dad getting into it what that is like. But anyway, back into the subject. Yes, well, I know, Sachigan, that whatever you're into is great, but lately I've just been pulled into Fortnite, and I'm quite enjoying it. Oh yeah, we've got Ninjuro 88 in there, do we? I missed. Hey Ninjuro, good to see. And everybody else there. PUBG, yes, it's probably more my natural sort of style, but again, with the lads, so and I've been appreciating Fortnite. Anyway, back into the trophy stuff. So Trump was coming to Japan, and he's a big pro wrestling guy, so it's kind of natural that he would want to get into sumo wrestling, or that he'd have an interest in sumo wrestling, and he asked to come and present a cup, and so they had to make a cup, which is apparently going to be presented as the trophy for the May tournament now every year going forward, the American President's Trophy. He didn't call it the Trump Trophy, thank God, although he probably will call it that outside. Some people showing their age there. Yes, but in any case, this is the typical. First of all, they've got the Empress Trophy, which is a lovely trophy, which they always give, and it's always enormous. And then the next one they always give is a 40-kilogram Sori Daijin Shot Prime Minister's Trophy. That's Shinzo giving it there. He carried it all by himself, handed it over to Asanoyama, who won this tournament. First time he's won this tournament, which is good to see more people doing that. Oh, that's a good topic, Bradley Ford. You have my interest on that, actually, a little bit. I'll talk about it briefly. Yes, I will come back to that. But let me finish this. So, yes, indeed, he handed it over. So we were all wondering what the American trophy was going to look like. And, yes, surprisingly, it wasn't. You thought he'd go for bigger. It certainly is much, much taller. But apparently it only weighs 30 kilograms. But it is kind of enormous, and it did take 2 people to carry it. So it does have at least it's, Abe went for the short and stout kind of thing, and Trump went for the big and long. Although apparently, Abe's was bigger, so there we go. No one. I was expecting something to be super garish, but I thought it's a pretty cool trophy. Hell, it's from the United States, so I thought that was actually pretty cool. Of course, the whole objective of this whole thing is just basically not to end up the same way as Korea got screwed right away on a trade deal by America. Obviously, China's getting smashed right now. Trump rhetorically loves to bash Japanese business, including, not only talking about limiting the number of cars from overseas that can be imported into America, i.e. they're actually going to do like a Soviet style. Trump is actually proposing Soviet Union style numerical limits on the number of cars that will be permitted into America. As a way to promote American car sales, I think it's a great idea, because this is in Eastern Germany when they had the Trabant. That's how they got people to buy them. I mean, the worst car in the world, and they sold millions of them just because they limited the numbers of foreign cars that were allowed into the country. So I think it's a pretty good move by Trump. But he also has been talking more recently about making even foreign-owned company manufactured cars that are manufactured in the US, like the Volkswagens, the Toyotas made in America. Even those, the White House has said that they've identified as a endangerment to national security in the US, based on the idea that national security requires America to have a strong and healthy auto industry. And so it looks like they're threatening not only imports, but even Japanese own manufacturing, in the US, and all the jobs associated with that. So he's going pretty full on with the rhetoric around trade, and obviously, the strategy for every Japanese prime minister who has always been, show me where I kiss, and it will be kissed. The only person who really ever tried to do anything interesting with that was probably Hatoyama, when he met with Hillary Clinton when she was Secretary of State, and when he tried to make a helpful suggestion about where that they might be able to locate the base the Denmark base outside of Okinawa. I've told you the story before. It did not go well. He came out pale, shaking, and he resigned 2 days later. I don't know what she did to him. I have theories which I've shared, and I won't share here because I want to keep the show reasonably good taste, at least as much as possible. But in any case, they played golf. They watched sumo. They went to izakaya. Pretty much, it's actually a pretty good date, I would say. I'd say that Abe has taken Trump out for kind of a hot date. I guess with the ladies, with the missuses. But of course, I think it's wonderful. I'm a big sumo fan. Of course, there are issues with sumo, including the one which comes up every now and then, that women are not allowed to pollute, to ritually pollute the sacred ring. The idea of and by the way, this is not exclusive to Japanese folklore. This is something even in New Zealand and Maori culture, the concept of different powers and forces in nature and so on. And it's a superstitious, it's a ancient religious belief that women have certain powers that can undo the sacredness of places. And this is why they do not allow women to stand on top of the sumo ring. Oh, am I coming to Japanese sexism as well in a moment? But so around that, it's like there. For example, in the Osaka tournament, it's traditional that the Osaka governor or mayor or something like that would always present the trophy. But when a woman was elected and she wanted to present the trophy, and the sumo people said no because you're a woman, she got very, very upset. And I guess this is something that I don't doubt that someone like Trump would take pleasure in being able to say that a woman president would not have been able to do this. But more to the point, that would be a good thing as well, because it would highlight that, frankly, sumo needs to, get past this. Sumo applied to become an Olympic sport, and yet they refuse to allow women to wrestle. So they need the reality check. But that said, in terms of it being a date, in terms of it being good for Japan, just not getting its ass kicked and basically staying off America's radar for all the bashing that's going around right now, good stuff. I'd say well played, Shinzo. You can see why he's smiling. He's saying, yeah, this is going to get me about 6 months of delay. They've already said that they put off the planned trade deal. The Japanese say, oh yeah, we want to give you everything, but we have an election in July for the upper house, and we don't want to do a big trade deal before then because it could undermine us. We'll be able to probably concede more to you if you just wait. So is that cool? And Trump seems to have gone along with that. Plus, of course, they're very focused on China. I love how he says that. No, I don't actually like how he says that at all, but he says that. And so that's what's going on at the moment. But some good photos today anyway. Today was nuts. It was already we haven't even had rainy season yet. The way that the seasons go in Japan is you have well, at least in Tokyo, this is Tokyo tonight. It does vary in different places in Japan, of course, but Tokyo has like the best winter in Japan because it's like sheltered by mountains, so it's basically dry and cold but sunny all winter. Then you get into spring where it's kind of like you get a hot day and a cold day and a hot day and a cold day, and it's windy and it's rainy and there's pollen everywhere, and it's kind of unsettled and unstable for a couple of months from about April through the end of May. And then at the end of May it turns into sort of tropical, raining every day for like 3 or 4 weeks, the rainy season. And then it suddenly stops raining and it just becomes unbelievably hot and humid. And Tokyo itself is having a heat island effect. This is different to global warming, although it's similar to, but it's different. Global warming globally is climate change is talking about average temperatures around the world going up like 0.5 degrees over 100 years. However, there's another phenomenon that's happening in Tokyo, which is that when you chop down trees and when you eliminate shade, and you have a whole big mass of concrete, like just imagine like a big concrete like basketball court in a school, and that during the day that thing gets hotter and hotter and hotter, and even if it's like I don't do American temperatures, I'm only going to do Celsius, but even if it's like 25 degrees, it can be like 30 degrees, 35 degrees, really close on the concrete. And the more of a concrete area that you have, the hotter that area will become. Like you imagine a really big car park. Well, Tokyo's become like this massive car park that keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger with huge buildings on it that also emit all the hot air from buildings, from the air conditioning, and it basically creates a self-perpetuating bubble, and they call it a heat island effect. It's basically like Tokyo's become a huge basketball court, pumping out hot air above itself from all the air conditioning units on high-rise buildings. And it means that this is why you get these crazy squalls now over Tokyo, because cold air going over Tokyo, when it's emitting all this hot air upwards, it forces all this cold air into the atmosphere, and it triggers all these insane squalls and storms that generally they start over Tokyo, but they don't form into storms until they get to like Hachioji or Saitama or whatever, and they've been getting crazy lightning storms there throughout summer now. But the point is that apparently Tokyo, the average temperature in Tokyo since, like, for example, the 1960s when they last held the Olympics here, has gone up like more than 5 degrees in summertime. The number of nights where the temperature goes below, they used to count the number of days it goes above 35 and the number of nights it goes below 25, it stays above 25 degrees. And it used to be once or twice a year in Tokyo that it would that it would stay above 25 degrees, and they'd call that a tropical night. There's a formal term for it. However, last year we had like a whole month and a half, we had like 2 months where every night was above 25 degrees, and also you have a crazy heat day. A moshobi is the designation for a day where the heat is above 35 degrees. And there's a funny thing with Japan, because it's so close to the ocean everywhere and the humidity is so high, it means it's not like the desert where the temperature just goes up and up and up. It actually, you hit this kind of blocker around 38, 39 degrees where it just sort of, it levels off, where the heat is horrible, it's intense and it's heavy and it's humid and you can't breathe. But Japan's highest temperature has never gotten above 40 degrees, but it used to be super rare for it to get above 35 degrees. And again, once or twice a year back in the 60s and 70s. Now we've had in recent years entire months where every day it's gone above 35 degrees. And I remember seeing statistics for this. The average temperature during summer has gone up now, like totally like global warming is 0.5, but Tokyo heat island effect is 5 degrees. So you have this incredible heat problem. This is going to come up as a theme later on, but this was the reason that even back in the 60s, before it was this bad, they realized that the summer was so intense in Tokyo, particularly because of the humidity, that it would be dangerous to run events like the marathon in July. No one would be stupid enough to do that. So when they won the Olympics, they got permission to move the Olympics to October. However, this time there's TV rights, there's sponsors, there's pizzas, there's professional sports schedules. So it is being held in July next year. And everybody is thinking, well, July really sucks in Japan. When you get to July, it starts to get really hot. Well, this is the map from today. And I'm not saying that this is climate change. This is a freak situation. There are some particularly hot, like apparently the stratosphere, like jet stream over Japan at the moment is above 21 degrees, which is apparently even in midsummer is unheard of. And this has resulted, and funnily enough, in what should be the coolest part of Japan, where people go to escape the heat in Hokkaido. Today they had a day at 39.5 degrees, which is close to the national all-time record for any location. I think the all-time hottest location is still, I think it's Gifu. I think it's like 39.9 or something like that. Never gotten over 40 degrees. Maybe they did last year. I was thinking it's getting up there, but basically today, Hokkaido, Obihiro, I've got friends up there, 38.3 degrees, and Saroma was 39.5 degrees. And again, when you look at this, every light line is a record temperature for May, and it's May, it's not summer yet, it's not even rainy season yet. And the dark lines mark all-time records, and all around Tokyo you can see, all the way going up, you've got May records everywhere and all-time records all over Hokkaido. So just insane weather at the moment, and it is pretty daunting to think. So apparently 39.5, that's 103 Fahrenheit. But you have this pretty high humidity as well, and you know it's just started. We haven't even started summer yet, so yeah, it's pretty scary. Hey Andrea, thank you for thank you for the @mark, and good to see you this evening, and good to see Marco 19914, as well as I also see Marcin Sebula. Good to see you. I'm sure I didn't pronounce that correctly, but coming to Japan for a week at the end of June, what are your suggestions to persevere Tsuyu? Well, the good news is at the end of June it won't be Tsuyu anymore. It should be coming out of Tsuyu. It'll just be hot, and what I suggest is you'll need to carry a towel, carry water at all times, find where air conditioning is, try to minimize how much time you spend walking around outside, unless you're like up in mountains or somewhere really nice and cool. But Tsuyu itself, yeah, you just need an umbrella, honestly, and there's not much you can do. Quinn Rankin, are we getting tornadoes? There are schools, that, for example, again in Saitama and the areas around Tokyo, that there have been videos of spontaneous sort of whirlwinds and so on caused by heat vortexes. But yes, they also do get, and again, I remember seeing some fascinating research that the squalls and tornadoes that they get up in Gunma and Saitama are caused by winds coming up from the south off the ocean, hitting Shinjuku, those buildings, and getting like basically Shinjuku forcing everything to go up in height, and it causes these squalls, which includes these tornadoes up there. So yeah, that is happening. Andrea Morboy, how are the Japanese allergies? You mean for me or generally? Generally speaking, the Sugi season starts in about February, late February, and it goes through March. It's pretty much over now. There is a Butakusa season. There is which is, I don't know if it's actually Butakusa or pig grass, whatever that is. But there is another hay fever season in September for something different, which is I react to that. I get hay fever in September through October, November. But for people who are not good with pine dust, we're past that now, so that's pretty good. The J-Vlog, here in Oceanside, Nagasaki, we turned on the fan, not the AC, for the first time this year today. I'm on AC right now. It's hot in Tokyo. It was like 33 degrees today. So yes. Andrea Moboy, I know you sent the article about all the Australians who want to move to Australia now because of the election result. I was talking with my mum in Australia about this today as well, and all the Queenslanders that want to escape. But seriously, I mean, I think it's something that people sort of talk about, but in the end of the day, look, as a New Zealander, I'm telling you, Australia has a cheaper cost of living, higher paying jobs. That's why we all moved to us. That's why 20% of New Zealanders live in Australia. There are lots of great things about New Zealand, but New Zealand's a place you go for the lifestyle, not really to make a good living. And most people, you know, and yes, and Queensland is a different state of mind and place. But there you go. I am skeptical that Australians are really going to move quite like that. And believe me, my sister escaped Australia, hating how redneck it was. And she went to the UK, where they then voted for Brexit and now look like they're going to have Boris Johnson as Prime Minister. So I tell you, I think no matter how bad you think it is in Australia, I can assure you it's probably not as bad as a lot of people there feel like it is. But yes, anyway, moving right along. So crazy tinky today, crazy weather today. Oh, this guy. Before I get to this guy, there's something very important I need to show you. The governor of Tokyo there, Yuriko Koike, she actually had an important press conference this week where she told everybody that with the extreme heat that I'm telling you about right now, that she'd figured out the solution for the Olympics. This is going to solve everything, and the Tokyo government has done a full presentation, and they are going to solve this for everybody. So when you come to Tokyo for the Olympics in July next year, when you're going to be facing real risk of heat stroke every day, and it's going to be completely insane, she announced a solution that they have that they are going to be promoting, and it is this. It is a Hatbrella. It is an umbrella that you wear on your head. Now, bear with me here. It makes you look like you were in Star Wars, for example. Hey Sadiq, good to see you. It makes you look like a Star Wars character, or perhaps like a badass samurai or something like that. It does look like something that Dr. Nakamatsu, in a way, I feel like after all the times that Dr. Nakamatsu ran for Tokyo governor and he didn't get it, I think that in a way he kind of won in the end. This is the sort of invention that he would make. And yes, we have, and you know what? I tweeted this, that we were all being told to wear Hatbrellas now, and all of Twitter groaned. It was good for retweets and outrage. But today it was really hot, and I swear I've been thinking, you know what? Maybe it's not actually a bad idea to make people wear these Hatbrellas. I called it Hatbrella. I want to actually try to claim the trademark on that and make money. People pay me money. I can tell it's a catchy term. I've seen some news sites already using it, and I'm sure they stole it from me. But please go out and use the term Hatbrella and make it famous, because that is a Hatbrella. And you know what, I've always thought actually that during the rainy season as well, it actually kind of makes a lot of sense, right? Your hands are free, you can keep looking at your iPhone. So dangerous trying to balance everything, so this actually, but exactly, Sergeant Bilko, right? It looks like one of those wandering monk hats, like in the train station when you get the monk who you pay to mourn somebody or whatever. It looks exactly like that. But apparently this is the Tokyo government's solution to the heat problem at the Olympics. Yes, the world is coming to an end. Climate change is destroying the planet, but we can all wear hat umbrellas, so everything will be okay. You'd sell them in Australia. Hey, Knara, good to see you. I assume it's pronounced Nara, but I'll say Knara anyway, just in case. Welcome, and bring back the samurai hats. Damn straight, I agree with you. I do worry about the Hatbrella poking, but seriously, it's a problem with umbrellas anyway, especially when you're like me and my eye level is at the level of the umbrellas all the time. I literally walk like this with my hand between my eyes, because that seriously happens. That is a thing. So yes, indeed, not even a joke. That too real. So there we go. That is Yuriko Koike solving Japan's problems. I gotta say, the model here, there was actually a videotape press conference, and the model, I don't know if he was a city employee who lost a bet, or they did like a junk-in or something like that, but he does not look happy. In the photo he looks kind of neutral, but pretty much through the whole press conference, little Taro's, Daddy, was that you on TV? I'm so embarrassed. Please don't do that anymore. He's gonna have trouble going home after that. But look, I tell you what, it's so crazy it just might work. That's what I say. So there was that. That was a thing. The next, I'm gonna share with you. I'm gonna do some drama. I don't do drama very often, but hell, I'm gonna go there. I'm going to go down to Drama Town, because look, I lately, thanks to my Gen TV, I do watch a lot more YouTube. I keep up with my subscriptions. It is awesome. I like to support creators, and I consciously like to make sure that I'm trying to keep up with people and reward people who are making a real effort and making good videos and making content about Japan in a way that's well researched, that they've put effort into it. And particularly when I'm seeing Japanese people making an effort at doing this in English, I naturally feel an inclination to want to support them, at least by the default. And so there is this channel, and it is Find Your Love in Japan. I think is the name of the channel. The host name of it is a guy called Nobita. He speaks quite good English, although he's got that, it's kind of funny, he has an accent that is like an exaggerated Japanese accent in English. I assume that it's natural. I don't think he's putting it on. But he researches his stuff. He goes out and does street interviews and so on, which is actually always really, really interesting. And I noticed he was making a lot of videos on interesting subjects that were getting shared around, and I thought, and he was generally seemed to be interested in the idea of international relationships. And so I thought, well, like another Yuta, for example, another Asian boss, why not? I will, yes, I think some people here know where I'm going. I can tell from the comments. Bear with me, we will get there. So he does a lot of research for his videos. He goes out and does street interviews with people for his videos. He clearly has an interest and a passion for his subject, and he does seem to make some effort at trying to be even-handed, or to at least try to make reasonable arguments. But he does also have very strong opinions, and I originally was watching some of his videos, and some of them were interesting, and then I saw a few more of his videos, and it's kind of, maybe not so interesting. Asian bosses are a little bit better, but and then I started to watch some of his videos, and I noticed, that's a little bit of an out there opinion. I didn't realize he seems like a young fella, but he talks like a drunk 65-year-old sometimes. Well, let's keep going. Dan H, good to see you. So, yes, Asian Boss was interesting this week. It's a great channel to subscribe to, by the way. Highly recommend. I would have recommended this channel as well, but, he started to do a lot of things where he expresses emotion, he expresses anger. We don't need foreigners in Japan because you guys are just going to come here and break all our rules and do all this sort of stuff. Like he still does the all of you kind of stuff and whatnot. He's done a few videos like that lately. He's done a few kind of weird stuff, and then he got onto this one this week where he was basically, and it's funny, he did this with a lot of statistics. He presented it very reasonably, but he was explaining the problem that Japan has of rising motherhood. And the problem with rising motherhood is that he constructed an argument, and he constructed it really well, but I'm convinced he's completely wrong with everything that he pulled apart. He contradicted himself as well. He said basically, there's a problem in Japan of increasing single mothers raising kids, and the thing is that those kids, we have to think of this as a problem because a large number of them live in poverty. They have trouble, with school and so on. They don't do as well, and so we have to look at why is this happening and what can we do to address it. And he said that the single motherhood rate is higher in cities, and it's corresponded to increased power that women have, economic power. Because Abe Shinzo has been telling everybody about the I just said Abe Shinzo, didn't I? I said the names backward. Well, we'll come to that later on as well. That one's coming, because Shinzo Abe, the Prime Minister, has said that there's a labour shortage. All the women have responded by going out and getting jobs and making money, and now that they've got all this wonderful money, they realise, hey, I don't even need a man. Sisters can do it for themselves. Plus, there is so much social welfare that women can get to make extra money. It's just so enticing that all of these single women, all of these women, mostly married women, are out there getting divorced and taking the kids, and just because basically society has given them too much power, and they are disrupting society, going out and irresponsibly raising children by themselves. Nobita, really? For a start, you contradicted yourself. You started out saying that the fact that there are so many single mother families, or families just with a mother, is a problem because so many of them are in poverty, and yet at the same time you said that women are so economically empowered that they're going out because they don't need men and they have all the social welfare. So you contradicted yourself there. They're obviously not in that situation. I would argue, I'm not an expert on this and I don't have the statistics that he had, but he was saying that basically. Certainly women working more is part of it, but I would probably venture to say that the reason divorce and the reason that sort of thing is increasing with more work is probably the fact that what's happening everywhere, and not just in Japan, by the way, everywhere, is that both spouses now typically need to work simply because of the cost of living. Wages are not going up, but land and rent and everything else is going up. So typically it's really hard to support a family on just one income. And yet when both spouses work, it still is true that overwhelmingly the burden of making those bentos and checking the homework and picking up the kid from juku and everything, that falls on the mum. And honestly, true here as well, right? I mean, I suppose I justify it because I earn more, and I do try to make sure I can get out and at least make sure I spend time with my son every night. But it's hard for me to get out every day, but it's also true that this is the challenge I think women have in Japanese society, maybe more so than in other societies. I don't think it's that they're economically overpowered and megalomania going wild, creating single mother families. I think it's that people are expecting them to work full-time and be employees and have careers now, as well as having kids and being responsible for their kids, and that's an awful lot of stress. And when they're not getting any support, I think that's what's disrupting families, and that's a tough situation. So basically, Nobita put this whole idea like this is a problem being caused by selfish women. The role of men being in any way contributing to or at fault in this. Now, of course, the true picture is probably some blend of all of the things, but basically it was a combination of pretty anti-women and pretty sort of ignorant and a really negative assumption towards women's intentions and situation generally. Just the idea that these are selfish people out to ruin men and ruin kids' lives, being selfish, earning money, and we need traditional values where they're at home and not allowed to work. That's kind of the conclusion that was coming out of that on the one hand. And then in the comments, he's got a lot of pro-male people and a lot of, frankly, people who are anti-immigration people who are out there cheering him on in the comments. I've noticed more and more lately, which is bringing me to a place where I think I've talked about this in connection with the Christchurch thing, that I'm someone who really values the open exchange of intellectual ideas, including, in fact, especially ideas that I disagree with. I think open discussion is the best way to address these things, and I even enjoy for sport. I'm a lawyer by trade. I get paid to take sides and figure out the best argument, the best way to advocate for some side. There are times I get so frustrated when I hear someone else trying to make an argument against me badly, I'll offer to make it for them. I love debate, and I do enjoy the exchange of ideas, and I respect the fact that this guy prepares his videos really well, but I've come to question my own tolerance a little bit lately. Like, am I being too tolerant of intolerance? And I don't know. I'm going to unsubscribe to Nobita just because, look, good, best of luck to him. I respect what he does. I respect the work that he puts into his stuff, but he's got some really screwed up views. And as much as I want to support a creator like him, you're basically blaming women for, frankly, a burden that falls onto women. And frankly, it's a problem that is caused by men. So, without going to social justice warrior on you, seriously, dude, just get a clue. Anyway, he's not going to get a clue. He's going to keep making his videos, and that's why I'm going to unsubscribe. It is interesting, and the thing is, he goes and bases it on really interesting data. He does do work on it, including and he does street interviews. So it's worth checking out and judging for yourself. But I have checked it out for about a year. I've subscribed to his channel, and I've decided that I'm going to unsubscribe. And honestly, I think he's got some really anti-woman and frankly anti-foreign views that he's pretty openly expressed at times, and he makes really offensive generalizations that as much as I try to look past it, assuming good intentions, I can't see that anymore. I just really can't. Hey Tekka, good to see you. And yes, it looks like other people in the comments have come to the same conclusion I did. I really tried. Hey Perk, good to see you. Yes, everybody be nice. So anyway, I'm done with Nobita. I just dude, seriously, I don't have to be nice to everybody, surely. So there we go. And yes, I know, I realize I'm opening a whole can of worms talking about lawyers that we've dealt with, but look, I've worked with a lot of very good lawyers, and what I consider a good lawyer to be is someone who is always sincere and trying to do the best. It's obviously a profession that is prone for having people with bad intentions and not smart people doing tricks and bad stuff, but I've been lucky enough to work with good ones, and good ones are really, really good, and they're really interesting people to work with. And anyway. Dan H, I'm sorry, I don't know if you can take that back, but take it back, because was that a decision from today? I heard that there was a controversial match involving Tochinoshin and Hasanoyama. And I didn't see it, so I don't know the details of it. I'm familiar that it happened, but I haven't looked into it. I think there was a situation where, Tochinoshin made Ozeki anyway. He got back to Ozeki, so that was good. But I understood that there was a decision where, it was a call which went against Tochinoshin, right? And as happens when someone's on the way up, they might have done a EI, they might have done a consultation or a video replay, and they didn't do it. But other than that, I don't know the substance about it, so I'm sorry, I can't come back and speak in more detail about that. Let's go back into the topics of families in Japan, because this is actually, look, Langley Esquire from Tokyo on Fire. I recommended this channel a number of times. If you have any interest in the politics, most people here don't seem very interested when I talk about politics. They hold on, all the comments that have stopped. There's kind of, crickets chirping and ... Then I finish talking about politics and it comes back into being an enjoyable chat search. But I like the politics, so I keep talking about it. And if you're one of those crazy people that likes politics in Japan, you got to check out Langley Esquire, his video podcast, Tokyo on Fire. It is the best video format discussion of Japanese politics, and it does what I love. It talks about what is interesting. It doesn't just say this was the news this week per se. It says this is what is super interesting about that, and it is next level shit. It's way above my level, and I respect that, and I really like what he does. He wrote a blog this week talking about a letter situation where apparently America has taken Japan off the Hague Convention blacklist. Specifically, what they're talking about that is that there are many different Hague conventions. The Hague is a place where many conventions are agreed, but one specific one is that there's a Hague Convention on parental aspects of parental-child abduction. It's a very long name, but it's basically parents from international marriages in custody disputes using the borders between them opportunistically to try to snatch your kids away, take them to a home country, and try to get a favorable custody decision in a different country, which will block the other parent from getting access, trying to gain advantage in a contested dispute. Thank you, Dan H. Trying to get advantage in a custody dispute. Ideally, what would often happen from this is, like, for example, you take a situation like in Europe with Germany and France, or America and Canada, you would get parents with conflicting child custody orders in different countries, and often what would happen is that, particularly if you snatch the kid, if you're Canadian and you're married in America and you divorce and you snatch the kids and you go to Canada and you say that the other spouse was abusive towards the kids or whatever, or you just hide the kids for a long time so that they get used to life there, typically you'll get a finding that the kids can stay in Canada and the other parent can't come near the kids, and you leave these situations where basically the parent who abducts the kids in a dispute situation, when they say abduct, meaning taking the kids in contravention of a family law court order, that they gain an advantage. So in order to take away the advantage of abducting children, of taking children away in violation of court orders, the Hague Convention for Parental Aspects of Child Abduction was a treaty which countries voluntarily sign up to, which is where they will agree that they will use a common system, a common framework for resolving child custody disputes that are cross-border, which is, and the way that it works is that when you've got a parent who's removed a child to a different jurisdiction, the parent in the other jurisdiction can apply to a court in that country, which can remotely make a family law court, will basically compel the family court in the country where the kids were taken to return the child to the country of habitual residence, i.e. where the child is most settled, and separately to that to also determine custody under the jurisdiction that basically there's a formula under the treaty, but typically it's also the jurisdiction of habitual residence or the original jurisdiction. So it could happen that if you take the kids away and the kids, depending on how young they are, where it would be kind of traumatic to move them again, they might decide, if it's in a short term, they will just say send the kids back and sort it out back in America. However, if the kids have started up school and they've got friends and whatever, and it's taken a while to happen, they might say, well, now the kids' lives here are quite settled, so we will decide this under US family court rules, but we'll decide it in Canada, and we'll let the kids stay here in Canada until we have a decision. Basically, it is not perfect, but it is a system to at least avoid a situation of governments and courts having conflicting orders that are causing people, in cases where, and breaching a family court custody order can be imprisonable in America and Canada, and some countries in Europe. So it was a big international relations problem that this was happening. And Japan didn't sign up to it. And what was happening in a lot of international marriages that ended in divorce, if you marry a Japanese person and you live outside of Japan, what would happen is, again, the cases that are known in the West are particularly ones involving male Western spouses and Japanese wives, is that in case of divorce, the wife would take the children back to Japan, and in Japan there is no concept of either enforceable family court orders, laws, or joint custody. There's no custody orders in Japan. So basically, because Japan wasn't signed up for the Hague Convention, and just because Japan has a family law system that hasn't really been updated even during the Meiji period, just this concept that typically the mother, but certainly in the event of a divorce, the concept in Japan is that you're divorced from the kids as well, or that the kids will go with one spouse, and contact will cease. It's a very final kind of a thing. There's no idea of maintaining a relationship in the Japan scenario. So because of the situation, there was a situation where even though other countries resolved or at least improved the child abduction by parent situation, it continued with Japanese cases a lot. And you just have to just Google Hague Convention, Japan, maybe dads or parents or whatever. And there are a lot of just heartbreaking cases of people who have basically had their kids taken away from them, by their other spouse back to Japan. And they've been completely unable to have any access to their kids anymore. And I even know people who have grown up as kids in that situation, and it's pretty terrible on the kids as well, growing up like that. The Japanese general principle, their thought about family law, is that it's more disruptive to have two parents trying to manage a child's life in the case of divorce than it's healthier to just have a clean break and let one parent be the parent and let that be unambiguous and make all the decisions for the kid, and that the parent who is not present should have no rights. But of course, it's the common sense, the culture in New Zealand, Australia, most Western countries is that it's good for both parents, even in a state of divorce, to have a relationship with the kids. And this is a real problem. International marriages in Japan have a divorce rate of above 50%, much higher than the normal divorce rate. And this is something a lot of people don't realize they're getting into when they marry Japanese people, that you're marrying the Japanese legal system and the Japanese family law system, which rewards abduction. It really came to a head 2 or 3 years ago, where there was actually a case where an American man in this situation actually used private investigators, found where his kids were in Fukuoka in Japan, and flew over to Japan, and with the help of private investigators picked up his kids from school and took them to the airport of Fukuoka, basically tried kidnapping them back to America. And he was stopped by police at the airport and was detained. He eventually was not charged with anything. But when the American consulate came in, they basically said to Japan, this is why we've been telling you, so this is why you're on a blacklist, Japan, because your system rewards kidnapping. And it was actually, this really brought the issue, really was one incident that brought it to a head. But not long after, Japan did ratify the convention. So that's why Japan is now being taken off the Hague Convention blacklist. The thing is, the problem with this is that even though Japan signed up for the treaty, which basically provides a mechanism for recognizing the habitual residence of kids and a mechanism for resolving these child custody conflicting orders from different countries, the problem is the family court system in Japan doesn't have binding orders. It doesn't have any concept of joint custody. So they've got no capability to enforce an order or to make a judgment. To basically a family court in Japan cannot force a parent to give access to children to another parent. You could win. You could have sole custody of the kids or joint custody in America. The mother could bring the kids to Japan. The family court in Japan would be forced to respect the American family court order, particularly if the case was brought quickly. And they would have to enforce the right of the father to be able to access the kids in that situation. But they've got no enforcement mechanism. They couldn't make it happen. And so what's happening is, even in the best cases now, and this only happens after the convention was implemented, which was only 2 years ago. So all the child abductions before that have no recourse, even now. But even the ones since then, the problem is that even if in the best case, when you get to court, you still rely on the goodwill of the other spouse, who's from a culture which doesn't believe in the idea of sharing custody. Basically, Langley correctly pointed out that there continue to be pretty serious problems around this idea of custody disputes involving Japanese nationals. And he's suggesting that it was not good timing for Japan to be taken off the blacklist for the Hague Convention. I get it, they're taking them off the blacklist because they signed the treaty, but frankly it's kind of meaningless unless Japan updates its family law system to be more like that of other developed countries. Which they actually, in other news, Japan did actually start a committee to look into the idea of allowing joint custody, but of course immediately you get traditionalists that say, oh no, we're Japan and we don't do that, we must have very good reasons for it, and it's partly cultural as well, so it doesn't mean it's necessarily going to go anywhere, but it's probably a result of American government pressure, like it was at the Hague Convention, to look at this. But all of this said, it is a real thing to remember. So I think you get a lot of people in Japan who understand this system, and this becomes a real problem outside of Japan because people don't know anything about the legal system in Japan. They don't know that this is a thing, and they get really caught out by it, and it can really ruin people's lives. But even in Japan, a lot of people don't know about this. A lot of foreign people don't know about this sort of thing, and they can be surprised. They can have a divorce expecting. And this was actually, there was a Gaijin Pop blog about this, which I think I put on here as well. Divorce with kids in Japan, the stress of no joint child custody. So this is the other point which I'm making. Yes, people will ignorantly divorce expecting to have joint custody and then finding out later that they can't have it. Or you have people who know about the Japanese legal system and they're in really bad marriages and they want to be divorced, but they don't want to be, but they can't do it because they don't want to lose access to the kids. And that is the situation a lot of people are in Japan. And again, some people would say, well, better to have an unhappy marriage with both the parents looking after the kid, or and if a parent wants to leave, it's confusing for the kid, so they have to accept that they're divorcing typically because it's the man who loses access, that they're losing access to the child and the family. Bear in mind, not always the case that women get custody, by the way. It is certainly because, especially in Japan, when you're dealing with the extended families raising kids, sometimes it'll be the wealthier family. And it's often the grandparents that do a lot of the raising of the kids. So it's not necessarily at all. And remember that most international marriages in Japan, of course, involve Japanese male spouses. It's basically if you understand the family court system here, you know that you're really kind of trapped. If you want to make if you really want to make a guy jump into divorce here, it's not just a matter of divorcing because it's where you're at. It's actually you have to consider that it could really mean that you'll lose all contact with your children, and it keeps a lot of people in really shitty marriages here. So that is a thing. And it's really unfortunate, and every way that it goes, they go through and they do it, you can be in a terrible situation. You don't do it, you can be in a terrible situation. So it's something, when you're in love with somebody and you're having a great dating life, as Japan offers people. I remember when I think I said something about this to Busan Kevin when he was talking about the subject, and I said people really need to know what they're getting into with this because And he was saying, well, nobody wants to think about those sort of negative things at a time that they're getting married. But again, the lawyer in me is telling you that's exactly when you should think about this stuff. Frankly, the risk of this sort of thing is exactly why I was, the only thing I was assertive about was wanting to have the common family name, because I said, look, I know I've got no rights if everything goes wrong, so I want to make sure at least there's a name. It's a tough thing with Japan. It's something that people should be aware of. It's something that is changing, but is not likely to change soon. We're probably going to be wearing these hats before that situation improves. And it's a tough thing. It's a thing with international marriages in Japan to be aware of. So that's a big topic to talk about. Oh man, there's so many topics here. Damn it. Okay, let's just keep going. Shibuya is banning drinking in Halloween for 2019. I think I did talk about this last week. It was already being debated last week. So, on the one hand, it seems like, Japan's being prudish and fussy, they're banning drinking. They're banning it because, frankly, in no small part because of a lot of foreigners in Japan acting like we act back home. And when you think that this is unique to Japan, this outrageous sort of over-the-top banning drinking in Shibuya, It's what we have to do in New Zealand and Australia at New Year's and schoolies and stuff like that, because our own cities turn into riot zones when people go and drink alcohol at the same time. It's something I love about Japan, that you can have drinking in public, and you can have drinking and people don't flip over cars and throw bottles at police and stuff like that. We're certainly not anywhere like the riots and stuff that you get just out of boredom and alcohol in New Zealand and Australia. But you do have these dry zones everywhere because people are just so irresponsible with alcohol. Japan is a long way from that, but again, what Shibuya's done is they've just done what happens in a lot of places. I hope, and again, thinking about the most attention-grabbing incidents that led to this, specifically the flipping over of a truck in Shibuya, and that of the 12 people that were arrested in connection with that were involved because they were videoed and photographed from a million different angles. 6 of them were foreign students, not tourists. They were residents in Japan, but they were students, so they obviously didn't give too much of a crap, and they obviously couldn't handle their alcohol. And these were European, these were French, English, German, so please don't be a dick, because you really do ruin it for everybody. And the result is they're actually consulting, the council's actually consulting with asking all izakaya and all convenience stores and everywhere to not sell any alcohol anywhere in Shibuya during Halloween next year. It's ridiculous. But stupid people have put us in that situation, and it's unfortunate. It'd be really, I guess, Roppongi or maybe Shinjuku would be the next stop. And it would be really interesting to see. Can you make Roppongi dry? But that's the consequence. By the way, Nissan R33 Z-Tune, good to see you. And by the way, I have not had a lot of time to work on your track, although I have worked on your track a little bit. In fact, if there's time at the end of the show, and I've still got 10 more minutes because I started 10 minutes later, I will maybe show little bits of it, but maybe do a bit of a jam session at the end. But anyway, that is stupid. I told you about the Japanese lawmaker who was condemned while visiting the disputed islands at the invitation of a goodwill visit by the Russian side. He said, hey, why don't we just invade this place like the Russians did? Apparently, he didn't just say that. Apparently, he was excessively drunk the whole time. He blamed alcohol pretty much for everything. But while he was there with the former, basically, concentration camp interned Japanese residents of these islands who were going back to visit the graves and hoping for better ties so that they'll be able to revisit their old homesteads and so on back on these islands, the escorting Japanese dignitary from the Japanese parliament, apart from drunkenly suggesting reinvading the islands, apparently would also shout out that he wanted to buy a woman and he wants to massage a woman's breasts. He was on really pretty bad behavior, pretty much the whole thing. BTC Chiba, good to see you. Wow, I did not know that. Perk, that would be hilarious. But anyway, so the dignitary was not very dignified, and he's being sanctioned for denigrating the dignity of the lower house, and he has said, I'm going to fight the whole thing. He says he's not going to say sorry because he's not sorry. I don't know if he's not sorry about the wanting to buy a woman and rub her chest, or declaring war on Russia. I don't know which is worse, honestly. They're both pretty bad in different ways. But apparently when they tried to censure him for that, he defiantly said, I'm not going to drink anymore, but I'm entitled to free speech, and this is bullshit, and I'm not going to go along quietly. He announced on Wednesday this week that he is going to take, on doctor's orders, a 2-month absence from Parliament due to stress. This is the machine, the Japanese media machine. They just grind you down until you end up having a breakdown and going to hospital, and he's done that. But seriously, this guy. Moriyama repeatedly said oppai, woman's breasts, while he was drinking with members of the delegation at the town hall of the accommodation facility that day. I'm sure it was a lovely accommodation facility at the town hall, where the dignitary was repeatedly saying the word oppai, making everyone very uncomfortable. And he was basically already asking, he was at the friendship center and he was a little bit too friendly, so just not a good look. And And yes, maybe he wanted Klankun. Maybe he wanted a sugar daddy solution to the islands. I mean, who knows? Maybe that could have been it. This was a really awesome video. I just stumbled across this on YouTube. It is a jazz musician who is into playing. I mean, it's very much this generation. It's very much the generation after me. He's a guy who grew up playing video games and watching anime and loving the music themes, but also being a very talented jazz musician who's got this ensemble and this project in New York, mashing up jazz. And him pointing out, actually, and it's true, a lot of Japanese anime themes and music themes are very jazz influenced to begin with. You know, the Lupin Sansei theme and stuff like this are pretty directly jazz related. He's taken all of these and he's doing this sort of jazz improv with it, and it sounds awesome. It's really, really cool. But on top of that, when he starts talking about the logic behind it, I mean, obviously he's a student of jazz, so obviously he's quite smart, and he studies his music. Hey, Andrea, my boy, have a good night. He was talking about some deeper stuff, like the relationship between rhythm and language, pointing out that Japanese is a monophthongic language, not diphthongic. You know, when we say A, we don't realize it. We're actually blending vowels together. We're actually, A isn't a single, you know, A is A. If you stop that sound at any point, you'll either hear E or E. But Japanese chop it up much more finely, and he pointed out that influences the rhythm of the language, which is reflected in the nature of the music, which tends to be more point, whereas, you know, English, he said the language influences the way that people process and create music. He also pointed out that culturally as well, the melodies, Japanese often go on a kind of melancholy and then up. They sort of go on a down, up kind of thing, which is different apparently, or actually no, up, down. That's right, he's saying the other way around, that they end sort of melancholic, which is really weird because even like with the blues, the whole idea is that there's always a kind of an upward inflection and a sort of minor to sort of major kind of, he explained the musical logic of it, but he sort of pointed out there's a whole different mindset to approaching music and approaching the idea of positivity and melancholy and messages with Japanese stuff, which again, it makes the music sound familiar but different, which is really interesting to the people who are using it from an improvisational perspective. Super fascinating, super interesting. It's actually a really good video. The guy speaks really, really well. The music is good, worth watching. J-pop and jazz, worth watching. This is kind of a critical article by Reuters talking about the new cabs, which were, it sounds terrible, they were designed by committee, and I can see that they were, but they were designed by committee specifically to ensure they were inspired by the London black cabs, which are considered to be awesome cabs, which I think that they are, and you can put the suitcases in them, and they're very disabled, accessible, and they basically had all of these requirements that they wanted. They wanted them to be hybrid or electric, they wanted them to have TV screens, they wanted them to be high roof, they wanted them to be easy to put lots of luggage into and easy for disabled people to get into, and they created these very spacious brand new Toyota cars, which I guess that the complaint is that they are expensive. They cost about 30% more than normal cabs, than the Toyota Crown cabs. The Toyota engineers that made it admit that they probably over-engineered it a bit, but the result is, as a passenger, like when I'm looking for a cab, which isn't very often, but when I do, I look out for those cabs. If they're around, I like hold the arm in for the Adachi plates and for the Toyota Crowns, and if I see one of those nice ones, ding, I'll get in that cab, because they're really nice, they're really comfortable. So yes, that is something. Divorce in Japan, just talked about that. Names, oh god, we've got 3 minutes left and now we've just hit the news thing. So the foreign minister Kono announced that he wants, going forward, foreign media when covering Japanese names, to use the Japanese naming convention of surname first, first name last. Which he pointed out is done by foreign media covering China and Korea, for example, where they do say Moon Hyun, or whatever his name is, President Moon, is the surname first. Xi Jinping from China, Xi, the surname, they always say Xi first, and they want to switch. They want to do the same thing. They want Japan, like other independent, rightful thinking Asian nations, they want him to be not Taro Kono, but instead Kono Taro. For Abe Shinzo, they want it to be, for Shinzo Abe, they want it to be Abe Shinzo. I'm already doing it. So already there are English publications in Japan like Nippon.com that do actually follow the Japanese convention for saying Japanese names, saying last name first, and I often mock it myself when I see it, because my personal view is just like katakana words in Japanese. When When you are speaking a language, you follow the conventions of that language. Imposing the conventions of other languages into that language and expecting other people to know them is ridiculous. And I used to have an American friend who would stop Japanese when they were saying katakana words like McDonald's. When the Japanese would say McDonald's ni iko, she would say no, McDonald's ni iko. And it was really annoying. And I took her aside and I said, look, what are you doing? She's saying I'm teaching them how to say it correctly. I was saying, but she's not saying what you're saying. She's saying the Japanese word for McDonald's, which is McDonald's. And most Japanese people, if you said McDonald's, there's only 3 syllables. They wouldn't hear anything. They wouldn't pick up what you're talking about. So she was saying, well, no, they're mutilating our language. I'm telling them how to say our language correctly. And I'm saying, no, they're saying their language. That's the whole point. You know, when it's in their language, you follow their rules. That's the way I've always seen it. So from that perspective, when you're speaking English, say Hiko Simon, say Shinzo Abe, say Taro Kono, when you're speaking Japanese, flip it around. The problem is Japanese do this already. When they talk Japanese, when you're speaking Japanese, it's pretty common that with foreigners, they'll do what Koreans and Chinese do, which is that they'll respect our word order, and they'll say Hiko Simon, but among Japanese, they'll say Simon Hiko. And it's kind of funny. It annoys a lot of foreigners that they call us by our first names all the time. And often it's people overthinking, thinking that they're being considerate and following your convention and appreciating that, whereas we tend to, favor myself as well. I like there to be consistency. The other problem is that seriously, it's really confusing. Japanese never know which is my first name and which is my last name, and I get questions about that. And I think it'd be really confusing for anyone else to think that, if we reverse the Japanese names, although it is true that we do it in media with Korea and China, but if we do it with Japan, I do worry that it'll also add to foreign confusion as to what the first name is. Is it Prime Minister Shinzo? But there we go. They're asking us to do that. Some places in Japanese English-speaking media already do it. I still think it's a dumb idea. There's a lot of people saying it was a dumb idea, but I have friends even who came out saying, no, this is Japan asserting its identity and demanding some respect, and that's okay. That said, the rising wasabi, it swings a lot. It doesn't hit very often. It did hit with this one for me. This is the 1 in 100 shot that it hit. Kono asked to be referred to by kanji, meaning fat son of Wild River. I like that. That's quite a good one. I do like the idea of rather than just reversing the word order, actually fully respecting the full translations of the kanji names. I think that would be kind of awesome. So that was actually quite a good one. And we are up on time, and there's already there's a couple more big ones I want to do. I'm going to do them super fast. Okay, there's like 5 stories. First one is, read this. I did not know about this. I read this in a Radio New Zealand site. It's a long article, but it is the story of a guy called Kelly Savage, who was a New Zealander who was teaching English in Japan, who while in Japan, apparently it appears that he'd probably had manic depression before coming to Japan, and he did have lithium, he did have medication for it, but it turned out that while he was in Japan, he suffered a psychotic episode which required hospitalization. And while he was hospitalized in a Japanese psychiatric hospital, it turned out at one point he was strapped to a bed for 10 days, where it appears that he seems to have died of an embolism, basically economy class syndrome, while being strapped to a bed for 10 days. And the family has sort of taken up the thing about the way the Japanese hospitals, and by the way, not just psychiatric, but there's been all sorts of things about, of course, mistreatment of people in elderly homes, disabled homes, but certainly also psychiatric facilities. That people are often routinely restraints are used on them for really long periods of time, and the family's gone on a bit of a campaign and so on to point out the problems with this in the Japanese psychiatric system. And the article goes into real details about the general issues with the Japanese mental health system. It is considered by our standards to be a lot more backward. It does profit by keeping people in for long stays. Apparently it showed, like by OEC standards, the average stay in a psychiatric hospital for care is something like 60 days. In Japan, the average stay is like 290 days. Because the psychiatric hospitals get subsidies that basically are the basis of their income the longer that they keep those patients in, and they do use restraints a lot, and it is not safe. The story is, of course, as you'd expect, especially when they show in this much detail, it's a really, really deep and interesting read, and I really would encourage everybody to be, even if you don't have an issue like this that you're affected by, it's really good to know. I've known people, not in this exact situation, but people in situations like this, and I am familiar with how difficult the mental health system here is in Japan. Just how basically from backward is a term I don't like to use, but it is an area that certainly by international standards is very different, and it's not progressive. It's not a clean-cut story. Look, I read this whole thing and I came out feeling critical. I felt, of course, terribly sorry for the family that lost their son, and to have the son have this happen to them, to be this vulnerable and to die in this situation in a country on the other side of the world, or at least 13 hours flight away, is pretty awful. At the same time, this person, he did have the same thing happen to him once in New Zealand. He did have a psychotic episode where he did require hospitalization in New Zealand. He still came to Japan on the JET program. He was living in a remote town. He had a brother in Tokyo, and when he realized he was having a declining situation, he did take time off from the school. He did go to Tokyo to be with his brother, and he did go and seek out. Apparently the healthcare in the town where he was at was not good enough, and he recognized that. He realized he needed to go to a good hospital in Tokyo, so he went to Tokyo, and they checked him into a hospital in Yokohama with a famous head doctor. But in that hospital, he was restrained for a prolonged period of time, and he died there before his mum came to Japan. My advice generally on this stuff is two things. The first is, honestly, if you have a problem like that, or if you have a family member with a problem like that, sending them to be in a really isolated lifestyle, living on their own in a remote part of Japan, is not really not, personally, I question how advisable that is. I'm not blaming them at all for this, but you do wonder why. If he had a psychotic break, did they do any research on what would happen, on what the system in Japan was like, and what to do if this were to happen again? I've had friends with manic depression. I know that the mechanism by which lithium works is not well understood, and I know that people who take it often consider it to be a placebo, and they go off it. People I know who use it go off it on purpose sometimes when they're being manic. They try to take advantage of it and ride the wave. So when you're away from help in a country that doesn't have the same degree of care to begin with, and you've got the culture, and you've got the language, and everything else, and to the guy's credit, he did get himself to his brother in Tokyo who was there, and maybe that's why they thought it was okay, but it was a long way. He was like in Tottori or something. He was a long way away from, was it Shimane? I think he was in. He was a long way away from Tokyo. He got himself there, but he ended up, basically, my advice is, if you are in the situation or you know someone going into the situation, get them the hell out of Japan as soon as possible. If you're from a Western country, get them back to the Western country and get them the help that they need near their families. Don't rely on the system in Japan. Really be careful considering coming to Japan if you have conditions like this that require treatment. Japan is tough even for people without, even without these issues. It can be very stressful and challenging to live in Japan, and I do know cases as well. I've heard stories of people who have been through nervous breakdowns and had psychiatric issues that have developed while in Japan. Sometimes they're pre-existing, and people came to Japan to get away from their problems, not realizing that you're actually making you're making yourself a lot more vulnerable when you come to a place like Japan. And also the fact that Japan isn't an escape from your problems. In fact, if anything, it's going to make your problems worse. Which isn't to say don't come here. It's to say really think it through and have a good plan around it. And if you ask me, if anyone I knew was in a situation, particularly if they were not Japanese and they had this sort of an issue and they realized that they were getting into trouble, first flight out of the country. And this sort of brings it home. It's a really detailed look at not just this particular story, which has different aspects of it, but also just how the Japanese psychiatric and mental health care system in general lines up with international standards. And, spoiler alert, it's not favorable. Japan medical care, I think, is great. I'm very happy with my doctors and the medical treatment I've had over the years here. There's a lot of things that do work in Japan. Some things that arguably work much better than like in America or whatever. But mental health, I don't know, study up. And it's really good to be informed. It's a long article, but I'd really encourage everyone to read it. And certainly, I do feel sympathy for the family and want to support what they're doing as well, which is just campaigning to spread awareness and try to improve the situation. But yes, that's one thing. Very quickly, there's a survey that found apparently laughing loudly during a movie is rude, according to most Japanese people. That's a bit weird, especially if it's a comedy, but there we go. Apparently, this was an offhand joke that Richard Lloyd Parry, who I know the name, but I don't know him per se. I think he lives in Tokyo, actually, but there was there was a blog, Writers in Kyoto, where this guy gave a speech, and the opening quote, I saw, and I was mildly triggered, and I thought, oh, this is funny. I'll quote this, and say, oh, the quote is this: Kyoto Gaijin are different. Tokyo Gaijin are there for money or sex. Kyoto Gaijin are here for zen or lacquerware or heian poetry, or to learn shakuhachi. Now, apparently this was a humorous intro. This was entitled, this is basically to make everybody in the room feel good and more cultured about themselves and slightly joking around. However, the quote itself, when I read it out of context just there, I myself read it and said, wow, it looks like Kyoto people, Kyoto Gaijins do what Kyoto Japanese do, which is look down on everybody else in the country, just the same. And also, I also quoted, money and sex, baby, yeah. So yes, it turns out a lot of people, I intended my reshare as a joke. A lot of people took it with a lot of rage, and they reacted extremely. A lot of people seem to use Twitter for venting stress, and they directed a lot of negative energy towards Mr. Lloyd Perry, which I did not intend at all. And so people came out and pointed out, no, that was just a joke. People, calm the F down. So maybe you got a hard time, but you know what? It is actually the stereotype, frankly, that Kyoto people are snobs, that are racist. It's funny. Kyoto people are racist towards Japanese people that are not from Kyoto. I mean, there is actually a rule. I mean, I shit you not. You cannot buy real estate. I believe you can't even rent an apartment in Kyoto. Like there are rings around the city, and you cannot live in that central part of the ring unless you have been like 5th generation Kyoto. It's like the Nazis. You have to prove that you've been in the city for 5 generations, or you can't even call yourself a Kyoto person. I've met people from Kyoto who are only 2nd generation Kyoto people. When you ask them where they're from, they'll say, "Oh, I'm from Kyoto, but I'm not a Kyoto person. I'm only 2nd generation." This is what again. Some of my best friends are from Kyoto. Lovely city, great culture, a lot of understandable pride in their culture and their history. But they can be kind of dicks. and so this person, who I thought maybe he's a Kyoto Gaijin himself, talking about the superiority of Kyoto people, I was just, oh, turn it up. This is just like Kyoto Japanese people. And the rage triggered was kind of funny, but it's kind of funny. Like there was a great the Black Experience Japan episode this week as well, where they were talking to an elderly Japanese person about his view and his life story dealing with people of color in Japan. And he said, no, we have racism in Japan, but it's mostly to each other. Among Japanese people, we're fine with black people. I love the quote, and I know exactly where it comes from. If you're from Kyushu or like Western Japan, they just made up racism when everyone was the same. It just got too boring, and they just made it up. But yes, that quote got taken with some rage, which wasn't intended. I saw the humor in the statement, but yes, I thought that was funny. Burger King is, man, I want to pour one out for my Hamburglar homies. Hamburglar, I realize is a McDonald's symbol, and Burger King is not. Burger King does make better burgers. The last McDonald's I had, there was a dead fly in the fries. I haven't been for 2 months now. I'm off McDonald's. That's a good thing. Any excuse to not go. There is a Burger King beside my kickboxing gym, and I sort of treat myself with after I watched Super Size Me, and there was like a healthy guy who had a Big Mac every day, and they came to the conclusion in the documentary it's because he doesn't have the soda and he doesn't have the potato fries. And I was like, okay, so I'll do that. I need protein. I'll drink a protein drink normally after I train anyway. Why not just go have a burger, which is just like a sandwich, and I'll just not have, I'll just get a tumping, just a standalone burger, and I'll drink some water with it. So that's my treat after I get kickboxing, as I go to the Fuji Terebi Maya Burger King, and it got shut down yesterday. They closed it. Depressing. And Burger King, actually, in my time in Japan, it actually pulled out like in about 2002, and then it got brought back in. It got by, I believe, Fast Kitchen or something. It's basically been onshore and offshore. It's struggled to stay established in Japan. Fortunately, it's not leaving totally, but 20% of the Burger King restaurants are shutting down, including the one that I like to go to. So it does taste better, and that is a shame. The new Olympic Stadium, the exterior, the facade of it is done. That is what it looks like. They didn't really have to rebuild it. They basically just rebuilding a stadium the same size on top of the 1964 stadium. Of course, it's good for construction contracts and whatnot. But yes, and some people have pointed out when the feedback from the internet was not kind. A lot of people pointed out it looks a lot like a Japanese squat toilet. They also pointed out that although this was $2.5 billion and this was what happened after the outrage at a $3 billion stadium, the $3 billion stadium did look super cool. The $2.5 billion stadium, a lot of people say, well, if it was just another $500 million, they might as well have just done it because it just doesn't look... It's hard to look at that and not think of it as a squat toilet. Once you see it, it's hard to unsee, right? So yes, that is how we're doing. Hopefully the Olympics will go a little bit better than that. I mean, we all know it's going to be exciting with all the Hatbrellas, so that's something to look forward to. But there we go. Yeah. And by the way, Quinn Ragged, I'm not a fan of Farage at all. But I also don't like the idea. Look, throwing a milkshake at somebody is assault. That's assault. It's violence. And what if it wasn't Farage? What if it was an old lady? What if it was a left winger? What if it was what if it was a right winger throwing a milkshake at? It's assault. It's the same as punching someone in the face legally. I mean, being lawyered up. It's an act that involves contact with aggression. That causes harm and humiliation to the other person. Yeah, it's assault and it's political violence. And I agree. I'm not a fan of Farage, but I do think I do distinguish him from the skinheads and the BNP that he left. And I do think he's allowed to say that he wants Britain to be isolated and stupid and Brexit. He can campaign for Britain to be stupid. So yeah, I'm kind of with you on that. I do think that this is a general decline that I fear is going to lead to an end to democracy in a lot of places because people just don't want to listen to other views anymore. And the fact is, people can hate Farage, but he won the fucking referendum, right? I mean, that's why Britain's going out. I don't think throwing milkshakes on people is gonna help that. So yeah, I kind of agree with you there. Anywho, that is all the topics for the show tonight. I obviously am 15 minutes longer than I planned to be, but that's what happened. I did say that there was a lot of topics. I will not make music for Nissan Z-Tune. I am working on the track. I have something that sounds kind of cool. I'll plan it another week. I'll try to get that to you later on. And this was a good week. It's been kind of quiet lately. I haven't had a lot of news topics, and I was worried it was me being too busy with work and not keeping up. But there's just been a lot of really interesting stuff this week. A lot of good topics, interesting stuff. Please come back every week. Join me. I'd be just... It's funny, the camera here could be broken and I'd probably just do this because I'm just a crazy person that likes to talk to myself. But I do love it when you keep me company. If you enjoy the show, please remember to like the video because that helps and I do appreciate it very much. And yes, I'll see you all next week. Don't forget, if you want to keep up, you can keep up with me on Twitter and Facebook. Same username for everything. And have a very good week. Boom. Peace. Good therapy, indeed. I wouldn't presume that this is good therapy, but I'm glad that it works. So have a good one, everyone.